My name is John Pignata. I'm an intern for Worldwide Sports Radio Network. I'm currently in high school and I'm only 16 years old. And my goal is to be like, honestly, like you, to try to be like a journalist for like something like Sports Illustrated or like the New York Post or like any like big sports company or like even like an ESPN the analyst, like whatever, like that would be like that's my goal.
Well, first off, John, I'm very, very flattered. Uh, but you're on a great track. I mean, you're only 16 years old and you already know what you want to do and you're taking steps to pursue that. You're ahead of the game. I mean, I didn't start doing this stuff until I was about to graduate college and I was 22 years old and still figuring out what I wanted to do. Similar type goals where I was like, I want to be an analyst or I want to be on air. I want to be working with these athletes and be around the atmosphere. And really, it took an internship with WFAN in New York, where I was around a couple remote live broadcasts at Giants training camp the summer of 2018, when I was about to go into my final semester of college. And I was just a production assistant, didn't do much, just helped around a little bit, lifting things and hanging out for the most part, and interacting a little bit with the athletes. You know, met Eli Manning, Saquon Barkley, you name it. And I grew up a diehard Giants fan, so I was like in heaven at the time. And after that, I kind of just figured there had to be a way that I could be around this for a career. And yeah, again, you know what you want and you're going for it, and the sky's really the limit. I mean, you're going about it the right way. So I'm excited for you. I mean, that's awesome. And again, you're wise beyond your years, clearly.
Yeah. Can I ask you something? Were you always interested in being like a journalist for like baseball, or was it like just like the Giants? Like you said, since you loved working for the Giants, like was that like you wanted to be like a football journalist, or was it like anything like sports related?
For me, and I didn't even know I wanted to be a journalist. I thought maybe I would produce and do behind the scenes work for sports radio and then get on the air. But luckily, I sought out a lot of people in the industry for advice, and they said that's really uncommon. I mean, you see guys who have made it in the TV industry, such as Mark Malusis and Sal Licata, guys like that who are on SNY, Pix 11. They've been on WFAN. Like it's very, very rare that you're going to do a behind the scenes job and then make the jump to on air. It just doesn't really happen. So I was told you need to write, you need to build your voice through written words, because you look at guys like Stephen A. Smith and some of the greats, like they started off as writers, beat writers. Stephen A. Smith was eating tuna fish sandwiches and sleeping on a couch when he was in his early 20s, trying to make ends meet and reporting on high school sports. Like everybody started from the bottom. Like everyone has their own path, but everyone starts out somewhere. And it's just about figuring out what you want to do along the way. And that might change. So I didn't always, this is kind of a two-part answer, I guess, but I didn't always know I wanted to be a journalist in the first place. But once I started on that path, I was covering the Giants because it was what I was interested in. I was covering the Mets because that's what I was interested in, blogging part-time for both teams, trying to build a portfolio, gain experience. It wasn't until I went to baseball full-time that I was like, wow, this is just a personal preference, but I enjoy covering baseball a lot more than I enjoy covering football. I don't know if that's because of the speed of the game. That might be one thing. Like baseball's a little slower. It's a little easier to dissect and digest, I guess. Longer season, of course, day in, day out grind. More interesting offseason, more interesting free agency. The fans are more obsessed with the transactions. It's not boiled down to 1 week like the NFL. But at the same time, the NFL is the most popular league in the world. So there's a lot of pros and cons. But I guess just personally, I do enjoy covering baseball more for the reasons that I just said.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Were you like always like interested in baseball when you were younger? Like, were you like obsessed with it? Like, whether you were like a Mets or Yankees fan, like that type of like thing?
Obsessed might be an understatement there, but I grew up a diehard Mets fan, like live and die with every single pitch since I was almost 12 years old. The 2008 season was the first season I really got into it, and it only progressed from there. I mean, my viewpoint of the game and that type of fandom, like it changes, it goes away because I've seen so much of behind the scenes and the inner workings of how everything works. It just kind of takes the emotion out of it, but it doesn't take the interest out of it and the love out of it. So, yes, I'm very fortunate that I grew up a diehard Mets fan, and now I get to cover them for a career. And I grew up in Jersey, so Mets, Yankees. I was one of the few Mets fans out of my friends, and I got a lot of heat from them because the Yankees were perennial World Series contenders every year. They had Derek Jeter, who we all played baseball and we all wanted to be like. I loved Derek Jeter too. I hated A-Rod growing up, as everyone did, but I loved Derek Jeter. But I had to stay loyal to the Mets, and I took a lot of a lot of shit from them. Excuse part of my language, but you know, it paid off, and now I'm lucky enough as well to be able to cover the Yankees because they're a global entity. Like everybody knows the Yankees around the world; they're iconic.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun to be able to do both teams and not just one now.
It was cool. I'm also a diehard Mets fan. My first season watching them was 2015, and I've never been like create that excitement. It was crazy because I went to Game 3 of the World Series. It was one of the craziest nights ever. Even if I was like 7, like I've never ever felt like that atmosphere before. So that was like one of the coolest experiences. Were you? Did you used to go to? Were you any chance to be able to go to Shea Stadium during like that season or no?
Yes, I did go to one game in the final season at Shea. I believe it might have been my mom's birthday, actually. It was a late July game. I don't know why we would go on her birthday, but because she was not there. It was my dad took me and my brother, and we went with his friend and his kids who were Cardinals fans. It was a Mets Cardinals game, and the Mets won 9-1. And Albert Pujols hit a home run. Every Mets Cardinals game I went to, we went to a couple across a number of years with my dad's friend, and Pujols always hit a home run because he was in his prime then. He was a machine. He was the machine, and he was the best player in baseball. And he hit the home run. That was the only run scored. And Ryan Ludwig hit a home run to dead center, although it wasn't a home run because Carlos Beltran, who was still in his prime at the time, jumped over against the wall, reached his glove over the fence, and brought a home run back in and robbed him. And that's something that stuck with me. I mean, I was 12 years old at the time. I'm almost 28 now. Like, that was a really cool game to be at, even though it was, it was only late July. And I will say, with you starting in 2015 with the Mets, you didn't go through the heartbreak leading up to it. I mean, there were some dark years leading up to it, to whereas Matt Harvey was my favorite player at the time because he resembled hope in a hopeless franchise over a number of years, whether it was Bernie Madoff or, that resulted in the Mets not spending money and they were not competitive. And Matt Harvey became the best pitcher in the league in a short period of time. Although his success only lasted across a year or two, he was the guy. He was the chosen one, and he was going to bring the Mets to the promised land, and it almost happened. And I will say that was the most fun I've had as a Mets fan, was that run in 2015 from the trade deadline up until the World Series. That was the most I had growing up as a Mets fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have a favorite Mets player growing up, or like favorite baseball player in general where you were like, I love this guy, like no matter what? Who was it?
It had to be David Wright. And I was at Mets camp 2 weeks ago covering spring training, and we interviewed David Wright in a group, got to ask him a couple questions, and then talked to him after the cameras were off, and, just asked him a couple questions, had made conversation. And he was really down to earth, really nice guy. And it was just kind of those one full circle moments because he was my favorite player growing up, and he was like the model player, face of the MLB. And yeah, it was cool because they say, never meet your heroes because you might get disappointed, but that was not the case with David Wright.
That's awesome. Do you go to like spring training like every year for like the Mets and Yankees? Is that like a perk, kind of like being like a journalist for them? It's like that type of thing. Like, do you get like different perks from like these teams that you like write for?
Yeah, absolutely. This was the 3rd year in a row I've done Mets spring training. I joined covering the Mets. I got my job with Fan Nation, which is on SI.com, of course, bundled with Sports Illustrated. I joined in June of 2021. So I didn't get to do spring training that year. So I've been doing it ever since with the Mets, 2022, 2023. And then this year was my 3rd year in a row. This is going to be my 4th season. And with the Yankees, I did not do them last year. I got the Yankees site in March last year, so at my network. So I did not do spring training. It was just too short notice. But I'm actually going down a week from tomorrow, I should say, to do Yankee spring training for the first time. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And it is a perk. I mean, there's a lot of perks to the job. I mean, I get to write about baseball, talk about baseball for a living. Like, it's an everyday thing. And when your hobby becomes your job, it's sometimes hard to balance that and shut that off. But I love it. Like I'm very fortunate and very lucky, and just want to keep doing it and letting it ride and be here for the long run.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. Like that's my like dream, kind of like be able to like, it could be anything for me. It's like because I love watching basketball. I'm a big Knicks fan and I'm a big Islanders fan. So like if I could like write for like one of the big four sports and like live off of that, like that would be like the dream for me.
Yeah, and you have a lot of time to do so. I mean, are you thinking about colleges yet or anything?
Um, like I live right by like St. John's,
Oh, nice.
so I'm kind of thinking of like going there because it's good for like I've heard it's good for like journalism and like
Yeah.
broad. What college did you look into when you wanted to like get ready for like journalism?
I was behind the game. I didn't realize I wanted to do journalism until the end of college. I went into college as an accounting major and totally flopped. And it took that failure to realize what I really wanted to do. And it took a little time, but I figured it out. And I look back at that failure as one of the best things to ever happen to me. I mean, I was only 19 years old when that happened. You think it's the end of the world, but it was just the beginning. So I guess, like I've been saying, you're ahead of the game because you have all these options. Like St.
Yeah,
John's, that's a great journalism school. Fordham, Syracuse, Notre Dame. Like Notre Dame is, it's a tough school. It's a little further, but
yeah,
the big ones really are like Syracuse and Fordham. Like these jobs, like they pick out of that when they hire interns or whoever, and they're looking at the school. And that's a disadvantage I've had, is that I didn't go to one of those big journalism schools because I didn't know what I wanted to do
yeah,
coming out of high school, and not a lot of people do. So that's why I say, like, you're in a good spot knowing that so early, that you're going to be able to do that. Like, I wasn't a journalism major. I didn't have that experience. I didn't get those skills in college, like, at all. Like, I learned them all myself, and just by leaning on people in the industry who have had success. And um, it's been a learning curve, but I feel like I've learned pretty quickly. And it's just because the one thing I've really focused on is relationships and how to leverage them. But really, it's all about making relationships. I wouldn't be where I am now without making relationships and growing them. And that's what's the important thing, because you need to just be a good person, like be genuine, be a good person. People will see that and they'll appreciate that, and make a relationship. It might not even benefit you. Like, that's not why you're doing it. Like, you're making a relationship to be genuine and know people and get to know people. And eventually it does pay off with a lot of situations. And I'm living proof of that because that's happened to me a lot. But again, I don't make relationships with the expectation that it's going to pay off or expecting anything, because again, like, if you go into it with that mindset, then you're not going to get far. But again, you don't strike me as someone who would be trying to do that. Like, you just love it and you want to do it and you're passionate, and I'm the same way. And like, that's going to get you far if you play your cards right.
all right, sounds good. Do you have any other advice for like up and coming like journalists, like not just like me, but like for like other like people that are like interested in like the same thing as I am?
Yeah, I'll just say it again. I mean, focus on relationships, focus on building your portfolio. Write for a blog, maybe something that interests you. You're interested in the Mets. You said you're interested in the Knicks, Islanders. Like, reach out and try and write for a blog, or start your own blog first, so you have some clips that you could send to these blogs, and then start writing for these blogs, and just grind and do it as much as possible. And as long as you're having fun with it, then keep going with it. I mean, if it's burning you out and you're not enjoying it, then it's kind of tough in that sense. I mean, I've been there, but
Yeah,
um, it's just something you love and want to do, and you gotta start at the ground floor and work your way up. And one thing I did was, when I was blogging like that, I was also working in corporate sales full time to support myself in the first couple of years out of college. And I was balancing, and it was tough to balance. And I didn't write as much. I wrote weekly, but I couldn't really write daily. It was really tough. And I just focused on sticking out. Breaking news. How am I going to make a headline, get my name out there? Focus on stories, like follow everything on Twitter, stay plugged in. Jerry's Familia, if you remember him,
yeah,
he lost 30 pounds in the offseason following the 2019 season. He had just had a really rough year with the Mets, after signing a big contract to resign to come back to Queens. I tracked down his trainer who helped him lose all the weight, and I set up an in-person interview, and it wound up becoming my first freelance story in the New York Post. And I was still 23 at the time. Like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like I was really young and immature, I'm sure, and whatever. Like still had a lot to learn, but like I was able to kind of hook big stories like that just through like networking and keeping an eye out and being alert and being polite and being a good person. Like it's just, it's not very hard, but in this day and age, like sometimes it is for people. And yeah, like that's just one of many situations that kind of helped me, finally break in full time. I mean, this is the toughest market. And again, sometimes you can't compare it to me because sometimes you do need to go to another market to start out because this is the biggest stage in the world. I'm very, very fortunate and lucky that I haven't had to do that, but it's because I worked in the corporate industry full time for 2.5 years before the right opportunity came along, and I had enough like in my portfolio at
Yeah.
that point, enough of a track record. So again, everybody's different, and it's all about what you're willing to do. I was not really willing to leave. I don't think I ever would have left Jersey. I'm the classic, basic Italian from Jersey who will never leave, and my whole family's here, and all my friends are here. So it's not something I was willing to do. But again, like sometimes you got to make sacrifices to get what you want, and that's that's what you need to do moving forward.
That sounds awesome. Did you when did first Sports Illustrated reach out to you like when you first kind of like got with them, or like how did they like find out like who you were?
So I wrote for the Giant Insider. It's run by Chris Bisignano, who's the Giants beat writer, and Jerry Foley, who's their editor. I connected with them early on, like right after I graduated college. Wrote for them a little bit, built a relationship. They referred me to the site manager and beat reporter Patricia Traina, who ran the New York Giants site for Fan Nation.
Yeah.
So I started writing part time for her while I was working in sales. And I wrote for her for a year, learned a lot from her, a lot of useful skills. She's been around a long time. And also started writing part time for the Yankees site, which my former counterpart, Max Goodman, who covers the Yankees now for NJ.com, he's another one. He's a year younger than me. He's done great. He's a great dude as well. Started writing part time for them and kind of, grinded through that for a couple of years. And the time came where I wasn't getting any full-time opportunities. I was getting interviews, but not hired. And I was burnt out and I was ready to make the jump. So I quit my sales job, and without having a job, I'm not something I would recommend to everybody, but I just kind of rolled the dice there and, felt like I came too far and accomplished too much to give up on it and just settle for a career in sales versus what I love and what I'm passionate about. So 2 months after that, luckily, thank God, by the grace of God, the day after my 25th birthday, Sports Illustrated reached out and gave me the Mets site. And it's because I was referred by Patricia Traina, who I wrote for a year at the Giants site. So she referred me and they hired me based off that. And I really haven't looked back ever since.
That's awesome. That's a crazy journey. Like I've always assumed like you kind of like know what you're doing, but like based off of like what like you said, like it's kind of like it's interesting. Like I've never thought of it like that. Like I always thought like a lot of journalists like kind of like always knew, but like it's cool that like there's always like a lot of people that maybe like don't know what they're doing for like a lot of it, and then they finally figure it out, which it's awesome.
And it's not just one light bulb moment, it's a million. And you're always learning. You're still doing stuff. Like, again, my path is different. Like, it's not common. Everyone has their different paths, but it's not common because I'm fortunate enough that I started in Major League Baseball covering the Mets and Yankees as opposed to covering high school sports, covering college sports, interning. And that's no knock at anyone who does it. That's where you learn the skills and makes you ready for the job that I started out in. Like I've had to learn at the highest level, but I've used it to my advantage in the fact of like I've leaned on the most successful people who have been doing it. So that's helped me learn a lot and helped me through a lot of this stuff. So shout out to the support system and the existing industry and everyone I work alongside because they've really helped me a lot. And I observe and I see and I kind of act like a sponge. I know sponge is a cliche saying when you're talking about yourself, but like I really have just like done my best to absorb everything they've told me, everything I've watched, and it's really helped out a lot. And again, with the high school stuff and the college jobs and all that stuff, like I tried to get those jobs. I tried to get those full-time jobs and I just kept getting told no. So I tried to start off the right way that everyone else does, but no one would say yes to me. And luckily, I was able to find a way myself.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. Like you kind of gave like never give up like type thing, which that's awesome. Like, is that like a big part of journalism too? Like you always have to like look for like an opportunity, like no matter what.
Yeah, it's you do have to be relentless and never quit. But at the same time, you need to know when to take your foot off the gas pedal and just realize, like, hey, I want to be in it for the long run, not burn out and go for the next thing in the short term. Because I used to be like that. Again, like it's a lot of it brand building, audience building, and getting your name out there, getting experience, building followers. Like there's a lot of pressure, and you're competing with everybody. It's the most competitive market, and it's really just about playing the long game. That's what somebody told me, and it's really stuck with me. You got to play the long game, and again, just focus on building relationships and doing your thing and building portfolio, and like you'll be fine as long as you don't, as long as you don't wake up one day and just say, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore," or "I don't know if I can do this," because if you love it and you really want to do it, you're gonna keep doing it and you're gonna find a way. So that's it.
Speaking of the Mets and the Yankees, do you think like what are your predictions this year for both teams? Like,
Oh
what do
no.
you?
I'd say for the Mets, probably 80 to 81 wins. Um, there's just not a lot of expectations there. I could see them exceeding those expectations. I mean, David Stearns is one of the best and brightest minds in all of Major League Baseball. He's very young. He's there for a reason. At his age, really, he's 38 years old, and he's the president of baseball operations of one of the most valuable franchises in all of sports. Like they're in good hands. Like it was a great long-term decision by Steve Cohen, and the Mets decided to play it long-term by not going all in this year because they did it the last 2 years and it didn't work. So again, the Mets and David Stearns, who has built playoff teams with less talent and lower payroll, could potentially make the playoffs if enough things go right. But there's a lot of ifs. So that's
Yeah,
why I'm buying low right now and saying 80 to 81 wins maybe would be a
yeah.
good season. As for the Yankees, I mean, they got Juan Soto. I think Alex Verdugo is a sneaky good pickup. Marcus Stroman might be a good sneaky pickup. Carlos Rodon might have a bounce back year. Judge is going to have a huge year. I think Gleyber Torres will continue to build off what he did last year in his resurgence. I don't think they did enough in the bullpen, and they might have enough in the rotation. So I'll say like 91, 92 wins for the Yankees and sneak and get into a wild card spot, and we'll see where they go from there. I mean, if they're having a strong season, Brian Cashman is going to make some trades at the deadline. He's going to. Like the Yankees farm system is locked and loaded right now. I mean, I know they lost Drew Thorpe and they lost a lot of pitching depth with that Soto trade, but at the same time, like they have some desirable prospects in Hampton and Spencer Jones, and they have some guys there. I mean, they can make trades. It's just the problem is when you're so prospect rich, and the Mets went through this in 2015 and 2016. When you're so prospect rich, everybody's going to be asking for the top guys. I mean, the Mets even went through it in 2022. Billy Epler was unable to swing a big trade to put them over the edge when they were on pace for 101 wins because everyone wanted Francisco Alvarez or Brett Beatty and no one else. Maybe Alex Ramirez. Nobody else besides that was of value to around the league for the Mets to swing a trade. And the Mets looked at those guys as untouchable, and it was probably the right move in the long term. And again, I know from what I've heard that they did have some trades on the table, and just the asks were just astronomical at the time for rental players, and it just wasn't worth hurting their long-term future, giving up on potential stars and superstars to potentially push for a World Series that year. But there's the other side of that, playing devil's advocate of like, you don't get there every year. And like, that could have been their chance, but it doesn't even matter because their top three pitchers all flamed out in the two biggest series of the season in Atlanta in the end of the regular season to lose the division. And then the wild card series against the Padres. So again, even if they did make a big trade for a bat or whoever, it wouldn't have gotten them over the top that year. And they could have lost out on a guy like Francisco Alvarez for the long term, or even Brett Beatty if he winds up bouncing back this year. I mean, he's still very young and has minimal experience. So I think they played it right. And again, back to the Yankees. I mean, they'll be making a trade. I mean, Brian Cashman always finds a way as well without giving up his best guys usually. So if they're in it, they'll be wheeling and dealing, and they might have a chance at a World Series this year, but we'll see. Long way to go.
I absolutely agree. Do you think Soto's gonna go to the Mets? Because I saw something about Buster Olney saying it today during the spring training game. I would be surprised though, like if he jumped ship like right after this season. Do you think that's gonna happen too, or do you think he's gonna resign or go somewhere else?
I think if Juan Soto has a huge year, the Yankees are not going to let him out the door. I don't see that happening. They know that their fans will kill them if they let him go if he has a huge year. If he has a so-so year or maybe a down year, then maybe he'll go somewhere else. He'll still probably get 600 million. I don't know if the Mets are going to be serious about him. I think they're going to probably do everything they can to re-sign Pete Alonso, and I just don't see them handing out two massive contracts like that to two players in one offseason. It just kind of would contradict everything that they've been saying the last year or so. I mean, I know they're saying their window was 2025, 2026. More money's coming off the books. They won't have to pay these taxes. They won't be paying players who aren't on the team anymore, but I don't know. I don't see them getting both, and I think they're going to wind up re-signing Alonso, and I see the Yankees re-signing Soto if he doesn't go somewhere else.
Yeah. What do you think the cause is for like this slow off season? Do you think it's like because these guys are like want all this money and like they're not valued it by other teams, or do you think it's like I saw something about like Scott Boras? A lot of his clients are like still out there, which is crazy. Like I don't know if Blake Snell's with him, but it's crazy how like he won the Cy Young and he's still out there in the beginning of March. Like, do you think there's like a reason why it's going so slow compared to like even compared to last year? I don't think it went this slow. Do you think there's like a legit reason why, or it's just like a coincidence, kind of?
It's really tough to say. It's definitely not a coincidence, but we saw this in 2019 going into the 2019 season. There was a lot of big names still out there heading it when we got into spring training. And I mean, Bryce Harper and Manny Machado held up those markets that year, but even after they signed in, I believe, February, after spring training started, like there was still a lot of guys out there. I think it's probably more so what you alluded to about money and value and need of a team. I mean, I've talked to some people who've said it's really about teams figuring out what they need at this point, but I think it's more so probably a money and a value thing that's causing the standoff. And we'll see these guys sign soon because the clock's ticking. We're almost into the regular season. We got a couple more weeks to go. So I think some guys are gonna have to settle on short-term 1-year deals who are still out there and then restart it and hope for the best next year, getting a long-term deal.
Yeah. Do you go to like opening day for like the Mets or Yankees, or is it kind of like I don't like what's your day in the life as like a journalist? Like during the baseball season, like do you like go to games? Do you like travel on like road trips, or like what's kind of like your day? I've always been curious.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different now. When I was just covering the Mets through 2021 and 2022, I did do some road trips. Not every road trip, but I did travel. Most of the East Coast teams, I would travel at least once or twice for each team that they played. You know, whether it was the Phillies, Marlins, Braves, whoever. I always make a trip out to LA for the Dodgers every year, and I plan on doing that again this year. But now since I got the Yankees, I've really just been focused on covering the home games. So it's every other week. I mean, 1 week the Mets are home, and then the next week the Yankees are home. So I'm covering a couple games a week for each team. I'm not there every day anymore, but I'm there a couple times a week. And
Yeah.
and yeah, that's really what it is with like occasional travel mixed in. And then obviously when the postseason starts, I'll try and be with both teams as much as possible. We'll see how that goes. I mean, haven't experienced that yet because last year was my first season with the Yankees, so neither of them made the playoffs. So we'll see. I mean, it's just a lot of it's a grind. Even doing a couple games a week is a grind every week because I live in Hoboken, so I have an hour commute on the PATH train and the subway. So it's a little bit grueling. And it's long days. I mean, I leave my house at 1:30 in the afternoon and I get home between 12 and 1. Like it's a very long day. So but again, you get to the ballpark, you put your stuff in the press box, you go down to the clubhouse, you talk to players, you talk to media, you go do the press conference with the manager, you ask questions, and then you either go out on the field and stand around and hang out, or you go up in the press box and write. And I usually go up in the press box and write because it's when it's good to get work done leading up to first pitch. It's hard to kind of get stories done during the game because you're trying to focus and take it all in and be observant and see what happens. So yeah. And then obviously after the game, you go back in the clubhouse, you talk to the players, whoever was the stars of the night or the not gonna even say the GOATs because has such a strong meaning now that like the GOAT is the greatest of all time. No, I mean like whoever messed up or whoever did great. Like you're going to talk to them if it was important in the game, and then you talk to the manager, and that's about it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's just it's a grind because baseball's every day.
It was an honor doing this interview with you, especially with like since you're like such like you're still kind of like new, I guess. Like, right? Are you still considered like a new journalist for like your age, or like what is that like? Like is like are 30-year-olds like kind of like or like?
Sorry about that.
You're good. Like, are you considered still a young journalist, like by like your age, or no? Like,
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, this is my 4th season covering the Mets full time. It's my 2nd season covering the Yankees, so I don't feel that new, but I still am. I'm going to be 28 in May. I started when I like just turned 25. So yeah, I'm new. I mean, there's not a lot of 20 somethings in baseball, at least. There's not a lot of 20 somethings doing this full time, especially in the New York market for baseball between Mets and Yankees. There are some younger guys, especially on the Yankees beat. But as far as like 20 somethings, it's me and it's Max Goodman, who I mentioned before, who covers the Yankees for NJ.com. So,
yeah,
and he's had a similar path to me. He went to Northwestern, which actually is another good point because when we're talking about colleges and journalism, Northwestern is pristine and you will get picked out of that litter. I obviously it's competitive. You have your other colleagues there, but
yeah,
that's helped Max a lot. I know it is, and he's more polished. He was more polished than me quicker because of his experience he got at Northwestern. So I believe we're the only 220 somethings in baseball right now, full time. So again, it's rare,
yeah,
and you know, if it was easy, everyone would do it, but it's not. So again, it's not impossible, but yeah, it's it's interesting. It's a little more of an older field. I mean, it's a tough career and it's a tough it's a grueling job. But
yeah.
again, whoever stays in it are the ones who love it. You know.
Yeah. No, I agree.
This was fun. I'm honored, honestly, that you had me on. It's I'm always glad to share advice and talk about this stuff because it's a long story and not everyone wants to hear it. So the fact that this was the purpose of that, like, then you know, I'm grateful that you had me.